Recently I played Bloodsuckers, a game about vampires, and that game really didn't do it for me. However, just the theme made me want to play a game in my collection that I haven't played in a while, but that I enjoy a lot and that I did play quite a bit in the past. The game is Dracula, a two-player game where a player is going to be Van Helsing, the other player is going to be Dracula, and the players are going to go against the target cards of the opponents, and the opponent's going to try to hide them. This is a game that is not a new one, came out a couple of years ago, but I do believe that it is a very smart design. I think it is an underrated game that deserves more visibility. It doesn't have a video, so guess what? I'm going to make a video review for it today. Each player in this game will use two decks of cards. Each player has a deck of target cards. Those are the target cards for Dracula, and these are sample target cards. And these are the target cards for Van Helsing, and these are some sample target cards. Each deck of target cards includes a card that will damage the opponent if the opponent flips that card. So if Van Helsing flips the dark amulet belonging to Dracula, Van Helsing receives a hit, and if Dracula finds the cross, then it is Dracula that receives some damage. Then each player can rely on the help of some helpers, minions. Dracula brought some of his ferocious wives with him. And Van Helsing has some vampire hunters that will help him, and these helpers have different levels of strength, as indicated by that number there in the top left corner. Then each player also has some cards that he is trying to defend from the opponent. Dracula is trying to defend his coffins that he is hiding somewhere around London, and Van Helsing is looking for those coffins. And there are 5 virgins that are under Van Helsing's protection, and Van Helsing has to try and defend them against Dracula. Also, each player will use a deck of action cards. There is a deck of action cards for Dracula and one for Van Helsing, but I will explain later how those work. At the beginning of the game, each player draws 5 cards from his deck of 10 action cards. Then each player chooses 6 cards from his deck of action cards, and the 12 cards are shuffled together and placed randomly face down on the board. So at the beginning you know what cards you have on the board, but you do not know exactly where they are. You have to explore a little bit before you can start manipulating the board to your advantage. Van Helsing starts there, Dracula starts there. At the beginning, players have 4 health cubes, energy cubes each. Each turn, the first thing that a player does is to move. Characters can move orthogonally, but never diagonally. And as you move, you count the number of cards, of locations that you moved. In this case, Dracula moved 1, 2, 3. Every time that you move, you may, but you do not have to, you may look at the card that you landed on. If it is one of your cards, like in this case for Dracula, you can choose, well, you look at it, you don't show it to the opponent, and you can choose to just leave it there, or you can choose to place it in your hand and then to put a card back on the board, which can be the same card. You just pretended that maybe you were switching it, or you may actually and effectively switch the card and place another one of your cards on the board. And as long as you keep moving and you flip your own cards, you can keep moving and look at cards and decide whether you want to switch them with swap them with cards that you have in your hand or not. But remember, you can also just move without looking at cards. That's optional. When you move and you land on a card of the opponent, then several things may happen. If you found one of the targets you're looking for example, if Dracula lands on a virgin, then he takes that virgin and he replaces that card with one of his own. If you land on the card that gives you damage, if Dracula lands on the cross and flips that cross, then Dracula loses a point of energy. And if you land on a helper of the opponent, then you have to fight that opponent that will use the level of strength that he has, or she has, because some opponents are Dracula's brides. Now, once you're done moving, you have to play one of your action cards, and you need to play an action card with a movement factor, which is the number there in the top left corner. A movement factor that allows you to pay for how much you moved. In this case, I moved by 3 spaces. I need to play a card that has at least a 3. Any of these would work, but if I play a card from my hand that is not enough to play for the movement that I made, then I lose a point of health for each move that I made that I cannot pay for. I play this one, 3 minus 2 is 1, I lose a point of health. If I also landed on an enemy, then I also need to play a card that allows me not only to pay for the movement, but to fight that opponent. That means that I need to play a card that has an attack value which is equal to or higher than the attack of the opponent. If I play a card that has the same attack as the opponent, then nothing happens. I just flip the card back and that's it. That resolves the encounter. If I play a card that has better attack than the opponent, then the opponent is eliminated and I can place one of my own cards in that location. If, however, I don't have any cards that allows me to, I don't have any card that allows me to win that battle. In that case, if I play a card with an attack that is lower than the attack of the opponent, then I lose a point of health. So things can be kind of tricky because usually cards that have good attacks do not have great movement, and the other way around. So actually, the more you move, the more you are restricting your option of paying for your movement after you're done moving, and also the more you're restricting the cards that you can use. So actually, if you move a lot and then you have an encounter with an enemy, then it is likely, well, it is harder for you then to both pay for the movement and to have a card that is strong enough to win the fight. So that's kind of the trick. The more you travel, the more dangerous it is to explore. The card that you play to pay for movement and potentially for attack is also used for other things. After you resolve these two things, then you may perform the special action described on the card. I play this card, then I can move any one figure to the harbor. Or Van Helsing may not move a barrier his next turn. I'll explain what the barriers are. If you have revealed Van Helsing's crucifix this turn, then you lose no energy token. So there are some really good effects, and this is not all. After you resolve that effect, see, there's a lot of information on these cards. After you resolve that effect, well, that has no effect, but after you resolve the effect, then you can interact with the barrier of that color. There are 4 barriers of 4 different colors. If you play a card with a barrier of a color that is not on the board yet, then you simply can place that barrier on the board. Barriers are placed between cards, that is, between locations, and they are impassable by both players. So you can use them to prevent the opponent from reaching a location too soon, because you cannot completely seal off a location, like in this case. All locations have to be reachable somehow, but this, for example, would be a perfectly legal placement of barriers. Still, if Van Helsing wants to get there, it's gonna take him a long time, or he has to plan his strategy in such a way that he will play a card that will allow him to move a barrier, but maybe that doesn't allow him to move as much as he wants, or doesn't allow him to have the attack that he needs. So many things are to be taken into account. And moving and placing barriers is extremely important because it can allow you both to defend your cards. Suppose that is the situation on the board, and that Dracula wants to place a coffin there. Then that coffin is indeed well defended because it may take Van Helsing a long time to get there. But maybe Dracula, mischievous vampire that he is bluffing. So Van Helsing does all this work to get there, lands on that card, and boom, actually it is the amulet of darkness and evil, and Van Helsing loses a cube of health. And you keep playing like this until you have a winner. You can win the game in 3 ways. If one of the 2 players has lost all of these energy cubes, then the player loses the game. If you find all the target cards of the opponent, that is, if Dracula finds all the virgins or if Van Helsing finds all the coffins, then the player that found the target cards is the winner. But I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, but why would I want, if I'm Van Helsing, keep the virgins on the board? I can just keep them in my hand, in my deck, and leave other stuff there. Well, you should not do that, or at least you should be very careful about doing that, because the third condition to win the game is if your opponent can establish that you have none of your target cards on the board, meaning that Van Helsing hasn't left any virgins on the board, then the opponent wins the game. And the contrary is true. If I'm Van Helsing and I establish that Dracula has no coffins on the board, he's hiding them all in his hand, then I win the game. And this is made possible by the fact that when the 2 characters are sharing the same location, they don't attack each other, because that wouldn't be gentlemanly. But what they can do is that the active player may choose to force both players to show their hands. So if I'm Van Helsing, I haven't found any coffins in a while. I start being suspicious. I run after Dracula. I force him to show his hand, and I also show mine. I see that he has 3 coffins in his hand. I found 2 of his coffins, so I know that there are no coffins here. I win the game. And this is how you prevent people from, well, being too smart. This is a game that really has a lot of good things in it. If you like hand management, this is the game for you. Because each of those hands is a little puzzle, but not an abstract one, because it has to do with what's going on the board and how the situation dynamically changes. But it's a little puzzle because cards can be used for so many things, and you're trying to maximize the potential that the action cards have. You're trying to play a powerful attack at the same time where it will give you an action. There is a big track coming by the street. When you play, it gives you an action that you need, and it allows you to interact with a barrier that at that point is profitable to you to add on the board or to move. So you really have to make sure that you're using your cards well. On top of that, you do not get a new action card at the end of your turn. No, that'd be too easy. You have your hand of 5 cards, and you have to play them one after the other before you can get 5 new cards. And then once you're done with those 5 new cards, then you shuffle your 10 action cards together, and you get a new hand of 5. But the problem is that as you're playing, your hand is shrinking, so it's very easy at a certain point to find oneself stuck with 1 or 2 cards that are not that useful at that time. So you also have to plan ahead. It's very interesting hand management situation. There's a little bit of memory element. Yes, you have to remember where your cards are and your opponent's cards are, but it's not something that requires some meditation level of concentration, of mental whatever involvement. And it's just enough memory that you need to pay attention, and if you don't, you're penalized. But otherwise, it just creates a little challenge, but I don't think it becomes a burden. But the main element here really is bluffing, and it's a great bluffing game. You're trying sometimes to defend your card, but not really. You're pretending you're doing so that your opponent spends a lot of actions and time and cards and resources to go on a card that then damages him, and that's fun. Or you're pretending you're bluffing, you're actually defending a card. There are just so many things. You can bluff in where the cards are on the board. You can bluff in the fact that maybe you do not have target cards on the board. You're just pretending that you do and hoping that your opponent doesn't call your bluff. Many elements are concentrated in this game. It's a small box, but really there is a lot of fun gaming to be done with what's in this box. I think it is a much underrated game. But it's a really appealing game. Actually, a remarkable number of people that I played this game with, that I introduced to this game, ended up buying a copy of the game for themselves. So that tells you that the game really is fun and people can easily get into it. Overall, it's a game that I hope more people will know about and more people will want to play in the future. So, well, I hope that my review helps with that.